Welcome back to the Old West Tales, where every story whispers secrets of love, heartbreak, and redemption. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. I'm curious which part of the world my viewers are from. Sit back and let me take you on a journey that might just melt your heart tonight. The old trading post stood under the burning desert sun, its wooden sign creaking softly in the dry wind. Dust rolled across the empty road, while men in worn cowboy hats tied their horses outside the saloon nearby. Inside the post, a tense argument was unfolding. "You can take the shop," the rugged rancher said, his voice rough like gravel. "All I need is money." The blacksmith standing across from him folded his arms and shook his head slowly. "I don't have the money," he replied, "but I got something worth more than gold. I'll give you my daughter's hand in marriage. That'll be my payment." From the corner of the room came a trembling cry. "Please don't do this to me." The young woman's voice cracked with fear and heartbreak. "Have you ever felt like the whole world was against you? Like the people who were supposed to love and protect you were the same ones ready to throw you away?" This is the story of Savannah Carter, a young woman treated like property by her own father, only to uncover a secret that would leave an entire town speechless. If you think life has dealt you hard cards, wait until you hear what happened to Savannah. Savannah Carter was known throughout the dusty little town of Red Creek for a kind heart and gentle smile. Folks often said her smile looked like sunrise spreading across the prairie. But behind that smile was deep sorrow. Her mother had just passed away after a long illness, and Savannah believed her father, Walter Carter, would mourn beside her for years. She was wrong. Only 2 weeks after the funeral, Walter rode into town with another woman sitting beside him in his wagon. Her name was Margaret Hale, though most folks called her Madam Margaret because she acted like she owned every room she walked into. Margaret didn't come alone. She brought her daughter, Charlotte, a spoiled and lazy girl nearly Savannah's age. The moment they arrived, everything inside the Carter house changed. From the day on, Walter announced coldly, refusing to meet Savannah's eyes, "Margaret is your new mother." Savannah felt her heart crack in silence. Unknown to her, Walter had been secretly seeing Margaret even while Savannah's mother was still alive. Before long, Margaret and Charlotte took over the entire ranch house. They slept in the largest bedrooms, wore the finest dresses, and ate the best portions during supper. Savannah was pushed into the role of servant. "Savannah!" Margaret would yell, while sitting beneath the ceiling fan sipping sweet tea. "Wash those undergarments I left by the porch, and don't leave a single stain on them." Other times she would bark, "You lazy girl, get down to the market and carry these supplies back before sunset." One evening Savannah sat behind the kitchen, crying quietly while scrubbing dirty pans with bleeding hands. Her father walked past without saying a word. "Father, please," Savannah begged through tears. "I'm exhausted. My hands hurt. My body aches. Please tell Margaret to let me rest." Walter paused for only a second before sighing impatiently. "You're a strong girl. Savannah, just do what she says. I don't want trouble in my house." Then he walked away without another glance. That was the moment Savannah realized her father no longer cared about her. The only person he cared about now was his new wife. A few weeks later, a young mechanic named Ethan Brooks arrived in Red Creek. Ethan wore dusty boots, oil-stained shirts, and old denim trousers. He owned a small repair garage near the edge of town where he fixed wagons, farm machines, and the occasional motor car. Business had become slow in Red Creek, and Ethan planned to move west of Dallas, where he hoped to start over and build a better life. Before leaving town, he decided to sell his repair shop and tools. One afternoon, Ethan visited Walter Carter's ranch to ask if he wanted to buy the garage. Margaret already knew about the shop, and her greedy eyes sparkled immediately. Every day she had whispered into Walter's ear about making more money and gaining more property. But Walter was drowning in debt. Most of his savings had disappeared paying for Margaret's expensive tastes and fancy dresses. "I want your shop," Margaret said eagerly, "but we ain't got the money." Ethan looked across the yard and noticed Savannah struggling to carry a massive bundle of firewood. Dust covered her face. Her dress was faded and worn, yet she was still breathtakingly beautiful. Something in Ethan's chest tightened the moment he saw her. "I don't want your money," Ethan said quietly. "I want a wife to take with me to the city." Give me that girl, and the shop is yours. Margaret laughed without hesitation. Take her, she snapped cruelly. She's useless anyway. All she does is eat and cry. Walter hesitated for barely a moment before greed took over completely. It's a deal, he declared. Take her away. Savannah collapsed to her knees in shock. She grabbed her father's legs desperately. Father, please don't sell me like cattle. I'm your daughter. This man's a stranger. He's poor. I'll suffer. Walter shoved her hands away coldly. He paid for you with his shop. You belong to him now. Go pack your things. Charlotte stepped onto the porch, laughing wickedly. Goodbye, little ranch wife, she mocked. Enjoy your life with your dirty mechanic. Savannah owned almost nothing. She had no fine dresses, no jewelry, no keepsakes except the clothes on her back. With tears streaming down her face, she followed Ethan out of the ranch. As they walked down the dusty road toward the stagecoach station, she looked back one final time at the place she once called home. Her father, Margaret, and Charlotte stood there smiling as if they had just won a prize. Not one of them even said goodbye. The stagecoach ride to Dallas was long, crowded, and uncomfortable. Savannah sat quietly beside the window, while tears rolled endlessly down her cheeks. Ethan noticed her sadness, but said very little. At one stop, he bought a small bottle of water and handed it to her gently. Savannah accepted it silently, too heartbroken to even whisper thank you. By the time they reached Dallas, the sun was setting behind the skyline. Savannah had never seen such a massive city before. There were bright lamps, crowded streets, horse carriages racing past, and towering buildings that seemed to touch the heavens. But Ethan didn't lead her toward the rich neighborhoods. Instead, he guided her through narrow, muddy alleys until they reached a tiny shack made from old wood and rusted metal sheets. One window was broken, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. This is where I live, Ethan said softly. Savannah stepped inside. The floor was plain concrete. There was one old mattress lying in the corner, a small cooking pot near the stove, and a single candle flickering weakly against the darkness. She sat down on the mattress and buried her face in her hands. Her father had traded her away for a mechanic shop, a common repair shop. At that moment, Savannah truly believed her life was over. I know it ain't much, Ethan said quietly as he knelt beside her. I'm just a mechanic trying to survive. But I promise you one thing, Savannah, you'll never be treated like a slave here. Nobody's going to beat you. Nobody's going to force you to suffer. A little while later, Ethan returned carrying a loaf of bread and one fried egg wrapped in paper. He placed the food before her gently. Eat, he said. You haven't had anything since morning. Savannah looked up at him. What about you? I ain't hungry, Ethan lied. But a moment later, Savannah heard his stomach growl loudly in the silence. He was starving too, yet he wanted her to eat the only food he could afford. For the first time in weeks, warmth touched Savannah's heart. Ethan might have been poor, but he was kinder than her own father had ever been. Over the next several weeks, Savannah and Ethan settled into a quiet life together in the city. Every morning before sunrise, Ethan would pull on his worn boots and head to a small repair garage across town. By evening, he returned home exhausted, his face streaked with grease and sweat, carrying only a few crumpled dollar bills in his pocket. Some nights they shared nothing more than beans, cornbread, or a small bowl of stew, but Ethan always made sure Savannah ate first. Despite their poverty, Ethan treated Savannah with a tenderness she had never known before. One afternoon, he surprised her with a cheap plastic hair comb from a roadside shop. Another day, he brought home a second-hand pair of leather slippers after noticing her old shoes were falling apart. To Savannah, those small gifts felt more precious than diamonds because they came from love, not obligation. Slowly, the pain inside her heart began to soften. She started smiling again when Ethan came to the door after work. They would sit together outside their shack during warm evenings, watching the city lights flicker in the distance while listening to the sound of trains passing nearby. Even though life was difficult, Savannah felt safer beside Ethan than she had ever felt in her father's ranch house. Then one terrible stormy night changed everything. Heavy rain poured from the sky, pounding against the weak metal roof of their shack. Water leaked through dozens of cracks, soaking their mattress and dripping onto the floor. Cold wind rushed through the broken window, while thunder shook the walls around them. They had no food left and no money to buy any. Savannah looked across the room and saw Ethan curled against the wall. Shivering from the cold, her chest tightened painfully. "Ethan," she whispered softly, "I can't keep watching you suffer like this. I need to find work so I can help us." Ethan immediately shook his head. "No, this city can be dangerous. I don't want anything happening to you." "I'll be careful," Savannah insisted gently. The woman next door mentioned a wealthy lady looking for a cook. "Maybe she'll hire me." The following morning, Savannah borrowed the address from a neighbor and walked across the city under the blazing Texas sun. After hours of walking, she finally arrived in front of an enormous white mansion surrounded by tall iron gates and beautiful trees. Savannah stared in amazement. The house looked larger than anything she had ever seen. The owner of the mansion was a young, wealthy woman named Victoria Sinclair. Victoria was stunningly beautiful, dressed in silk gowns and sparkling jewelry, but her pride was sharper than a rattlesnake's bite. Savannah found her lounging beside a large swimming pool, sipping lemonade while servants moved around her. "You know how to cook?" Victoria asked while looking Savannah up and down with clear disgust at her worn dress. "Yes, ma'am," Savannah replied politely, keeping her eyes lowered. "I can cook real well." Victoria hired Savannah on the spot as her personal cook. Every day Savannah worked hard inside the massive kitchen, preparing roasted meats, pies, soups, and fancy meals she had never even heard of before. For the first time since leaving Red Creek, she earned enough money to buy proper groceries for herself and Ethan. Some evenings she returned home carrying fresh bread, vegetables, and even meat for supper. Ethan's eyes would light up every time he saw her walk through the door smiling. As weeks passed, their bond grew even deeper. One cold night, they sat close together beneath a thin blanket, while rain tapped softly against the roof. Ethan slowly moved closer to Savannah, nervous but unable to hide his feelings any longer. Savannah felt her heart racing too. When Ethan gently kissed her for the first time, it felt like every wound inside her soul began healing. That night, in the middle of their tiny broken home, they truly became husband and wife. But trouble was quietly waiting nearby. One evening, Ethan came to the mansion gates to pick Savannah up after work. His mechanic clothes were stained black with oil, and his rough hands carried years of hard labor. Victoria happened to be driving her expensive automobile toward the front entrance when she noticed him standing there. Even covered in grease, Ethan was strikingly handsome. He had broad shoulders, calm eyes, and the kind of strength that made people feel protected around him. Victoria slowed her car and stared longer than she should have. Her heart skipped strangely inside her chest. Moments later, Savannah came outside smiling warmly before wrapping her arms around Ethan. Victoria watched them together silently before driving away. The next morning, Victoria casually asked, "Who was that man I saw you with yesterday?" Savannah smiled proudly. "That's my husband, ma'am." Victoria forced a smile onto her face. "Well, he's very handsome." "Thank you, ma'am," Savannah replied innocently. From that moment on, Victoria became obsessed with Ethan. She constantly asked Savannah questions about him. Then one day she deliberately asked Savannah to bring Ethan over to repair the mansion's broken generator. When Ethan arrived, Victoria wore her finest silk dress and expensive perfume. She stood far too close while he worked, brushing against his shoulder and smiling flirtatiously. "You're talented with your hands," she purred softly. "Why stay trapped in poverty with that little country girl? A man like you deserves luxury. I could give you a much better life." Ethan never even looked up from his tools. "I've got a wife," he replied firmly, "and I love her. I don't need your money, ma'am." Victoria's face darkened immediately with anger. She was used to getting everything she wanted, especially men. Rejection was something she could not tolerate. That same afternoon, she summoned Savannah into the mansion's grand living room. On the polished table in front of her sat a thick stack of money, more cash than Savannah had seen in her entire life. "Take it," Victoria said coldly. "Leave your husband and go back to your little town. I want him. A man like Ethan shouldn't waste his life being poor." Savannah froze in shock. Victoria leaned back confidently. "If you truly love him, you'll let him go so he can become successful. Look at yourself. Your hands are rough from cleaning floors. Your husband works himself half to death trying to feed you. Don't be selfish. Savannah stared at the money silently. Her thoughts raced wildly. She thought about the leaking roof above their bed. She thought about Ethan's torn boots and empty stomach. She remembered how her father had sold her away because of greed. Then slowly Savannah picked up the bundle of cash. Victoria smiled triumphantly. But before she could speak again, Savannah stepped forward and threw the money directly onto the floor of Victoria's feet. "My husband ain't for sale," Savannah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You think money can buy everything because that's all you understand. Ethan and I may be poor, but we've got peace, and I'll never leave him." Without another word, Savannah turned and ran from a mansion. She ran all the way home through the crowded streets until she finally burst through the shack door breathless and crying. Ethan rushed to her side immediately, worried something terrible had happened. But Savannah said nothing about Victoria's offer because she didn't want Ethan blaming himself. Unfortunately, Victoria Sinclair wasn't finished yet. Victoria Sinclair sat alone in her mansion that night, furious that Savannah had rejected her offer. The humiliation burned deep inside her chest. No one had ever chosen poverty over her wealth before. She poured herself another glass of wine and stared out the window toward the city lights with anger twisting across her beautiful face. The next morning she picked up her telephone and called the owner of the repair garage where Ethan worked. Her voice was cold and dangerous. "Fire that mechanic named Ethan Brooks today," she ordered. "If you don't, I'll make sure your business loses every wealthy customer in Dallas." The garage owner knew exactly who Victoria Sinclair was. Her family controlled businesses all across the city, and making her angry could ruin him completely. By the time Ethan arrived at work that morning, the decision had already been made. "I'm sorry, Ethan," the owner said quietly while avoiding eye contact. "A powerful person wants you gone. There ain't nothing I can do." Ethan stood there silently for a moment before removing his work gloves. He didn't argue or beg. He simply nodded and walked away carrying his small toolbox. When he returned home later that evening, Savannah immediately noticed a sadness in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked softly. Ethan forced a weak smile, but it quickly disappeared. "I lost my job," he admitted, "and the landlord stopped by earlier. If we don't pay the rent tomorrow, we'll be thrown out." Savannah's heart sank, but she gently took his rough hands into hers. "We'll survive this," she whispered. "God didn't abandon us before, and he won't abandon us now." The following days became some of the hardest of their lives. They barely had enough money to eat. Some nights they shared a single bowl of soup while pretending not to notice the other person was still hungry. The landlord pounded on their door every morning demanding payment. Savannah continued working at Victoria's mansion despite the tension growing between them, because it was their only source of income. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. An older, wealthy ranch owner named Harrison Whitmore called Ethan to repair his luxury automobile. Ethan had fixed the man's vehicle several times before, and Harrison respected him because he was hard-working and honest. After Ethan finished the repairs, Harrison handed him a cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. "My family is hosting a grand celebration tomorrow evening," the old man explained warmly. "I'd like you and your wife to attend. You're a good man, Ethan." Ethan thanked him respectfully before heading home with the invitation. That evening, Savannah stared nervously at the elegant card in disbelief. "Ethan, this party is for rich folks," she said anxiously. "We don't belong there. People are going to laugh at us." Ethan's eyes carried a strange spark as he smiled softly. "Just wear your cleanest dress. Sweetheart, maybe something good will finally happen for us." The following night, they arrived at the grandest hotel in Dallas. Crystal chandeliers hung from golden ceilings while wealthy businessmen, politicians, and oil barons filled the enormous ballroom. Women wore glittering gowns covered in diamonds, and men walked around in expensive tailored suits. The moment Savannah and Ethan stepped inside, conversations around the room slowly faded. People turned and stared openly at the plainly dressed couple. Savannah wore a simple cotton dress. She had carefully ironed herself. Ethan wore his old brown shirt and dark trousers polished as neatly as possible. Whispers spread quickly through the ballroom. Who invited them? They looked like they wandered in from the streets. Savannah lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the stares. She wanted to leave immediately, but Ethan gently squeezed her hand. "Stay here for a minute," he whispered. "I'll be right back." As soon as Ethan walked away, Victoria Sinclair approached Savannah with a cruel smile stretched across her face. Victoria looked stunning in a sparkling silver gown that made her appear almost royal. "Well, look who showed up," she mocked softly. "This event's for millionaires, sweetheart, not little country girls pretending to belong." "I don't want trouble," Savannah replied quietly, trying to remain calm. Victoria crossed her arms smugly. "If you really loved Ethan, you'd let him go. A man like him deserves luxury, not poverty. I heard your own father traded you away for a repair shop. Honestly, that says everything about your value." Savannah froze in shock. There was only one person who could have told Victoria such a painful secret. Ethan. Suddenly doubt stabbed through Savannah's heart like a knife. Had Ethan been laughing at her all along? Had he secretly pitted her the same way everyone else did? The thought crushed her chest so badly she could barely breathe. Tears burned in her eyes as she stood up quickly, ready to run from the ballroom entirely. But before she could leave, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced proudly, "please welcome the host of tonight's celebration, Mr. Harrison Whitmore." The crowd erupted into applause as Harrison walked confidently onto the stage. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Harrison began warmly. "This evening is very special to me because I'm officially introducing the man who will one day take over my entire business empire, my son, Dr. Benjamin Whitmore." The ballroom doors slowly opened. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Savannah's breath caught in her throat. Standing there in an expensive black suit was Ethan. No, not Ethan. Or at least not the poor mechanic she thought she knew. His hair was neatly styled. His shoes shined like mirrors, and the confidence in his posture made him look like royalty. The entire room gasped in disbelief as he walked calmly through the crowd. Savannah felt dizzy. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. Victoria's face turned pale with shock. The whispers around the ballroom exploded. "That's Harrison Whitmore's son? The famous doctor from New York? He's worth millions." Savannah could hardly breathe as Ethan, or rather Benjamin Whitmore, walked directly toward her. Then, in front of the entire ballroom, he dropped to one knee. Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at her lovingly. "Savannah," he said softly, "I know our marriage didn't begin the right way. I know I lied to you, and I know I caused you pain. But every moment I spent beside, you showed me what real love looks like." The room fell completely silent. Benjamin reached into his pocket and revealed a beautiful diamond ring. "I spent years searching for someone who would love me for who I am and not for my family's money. You stayed beside me when you believed I had nothing. You chose me over wealth, comfort, and luxury. Savannah Carter, will you marry me again, this time the right way?" Tears streamed freely down Savannah's cheeks. Her entire life felt like a dream unfolding before her eyes. The poor mechanic she had loved with all her heart was actually one of the richest men in Texas. Slowly, trembling with emotion, she stretched out her hand. "Yes," she whispered through tears. "Yes, I will." The ballroom exploded with applause. Then something even more shocking happened. Victoria Sinclair stepped forward, smiling awkwardly. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. Savannah stared at her in confusion. Benjamin sighed softly before speaking. "Savannah, there's something else you should know. Victoria is my younger sister." Savannah's eyes widened. Benjamin continued quietly. "Everything that happened, the mansion, the job, even Victoria trying to steal me away, it was all part of a test. I needed to know if someone could truly love me without caring about my wealth." Savannah stood frozen, in complete disbelief. The ballroom slowly filled once again with music and conversation, but Savannah could barely hear any of it. Her heart was pounding too loudly inside her chest. She stared at Benjamin Whitmore, the man she knew as Ethan Brooks. Tried to understand how the poor mechanic she had loved was suddenly standing before her as one of the wealthiest men in Texas. Victoria stepped closer awkwardly, no longer carrying the cruel confidence she once had. "I know you probably hate me," she admitted quietly. But Ben wanted to find someone who loved him for who he really was, not because of the Whitmore fortune. I agreed to help him test that. Savannah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time the pain was mixed with confusion and betrayal. She looked back at Benjamin. "So every struggle was part of some game to you?" she whispered. "The hunger, the leaking roof, watching us suffer, was that all pretend too?" Benjamin shook his head immediately. "No, Savannah, the love was real. Every moment with you was real. I chose to live simply because I needed to know the truth about the person I'd spend my life with. I've met women my whole life who only saw dollar signs when they looked at me. I was tired of being loved for my money instead of my heart." Savannah didn't answer. She quietly turned and walked out of the ballroom, while tears streamed down her face. Benjamin followed her immediately. Outside the hotel, cool night air swept through the streets while expensive cars lined the entrance. Savannah stopped near the fountain and wrapped her arms around herself. "You lied to me," she said painfully without turning around. "You watched me cry at night because we had no food. You watched me work like a servant in your sister's house. You saw me suffer and you said nothing." Benjamin's voice broke with guilt. "I know, and I regret hurting you for the rest of my life. But Savannah, I swear to you, every second I spent beside you made me fall deeper in love with you. I've never met anyone like you before." Savannah finally looked at him. "Did you think I was like my father? Did you think I would sell you for money the way he sold me?" Benjamin's eyes filled with sorrow. "No, but after growing up around greedy people my entire life, I became afraid that nobody could ever truly love me without my wealth standing between us. Then I met you and you changed everything." For a long moment, Savannah simply stared at him while tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Slowly, she realized something important. Even when she believed Benjamin was poor, she had loved him with her whole heart. And despite his lies, he had never treated her badly. He had protected her, respected her, and cared for her when nobody else did. Finally, Savannah stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him tightly. "I forgive you," she whispered softly. Benjamin held her like he never wanted to let go again. A few weeks later, Benjamin took Savannah to the Whitmore estate on the outskirts of Dallas. The mansion looked like something out of a dream. Massive white columns stood at the entrance. Fountains sparkled beneath the sunlight, and colorful gardens stretched farther than Savannah could see. Inside were marble floors, crystal chandeliers, velvet furniture, and rooms larger than entire houses back in Red Creek. "This is your home now," Benjamin told her gently. Servants welcomed Savannah respectfully, calling her Miss Whitmore. For the first time in her life, she slept in a bed softer than clouds and wore dresses made from expensive silk instead of rough cotton. Benjamin bought her jewelry that glittered brighter than the stars and filled her closet with beautiful gowns from New York and Chicago. Yet despite all the luxury surrounding her, Savannah remained quiet and distant for several days. One evening, Benjamin found her sitting alone beside the balcony overlooking the gardens. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold while soft wind moved through her hair. "You still ain't happy," he said softly as he sat beside her. Savannah looked down at her hands. "I spent so much of my life believing I wasn't worth anything. My father sold me away like I was property. Then I finally found someone who made me feel loved, only to discover he wasn't who I thought he was." Benjamin gently held her hands. "I know I made mistakes, but I promise you one thing, Savannah, from now on there'll be no more lies between us." Savannah studied his face quietly before leaning into his chest. "I believe you," she whispered. From that moment forward, their relationship became even stronger than before. Benjamin no longer hid any part of himself from her. He took her traveling across Texas, introduced her proudly to business partners and wealthy families, and treated her not like a poor country girl, but like the queen of his heart. Months passed peacefully until news of Savannah's new life finally reached Red Creek. Back at the old ranch house, Walter Carter nearly dropped his coffee mug when he heard the gossip spreading through town. "Savannah?" he exclaimed in disbelief. "The same Savannah we sent away?" Folks nodded excitedly. "She married Benjamin Whitmore, Harrison Whitmore's son. They say she's living in the biggest mansion in Dallas now." Margaret's eyes widened greedily. Charlotte nearly screamed. That little nobody is rich now. Almost immediately, greed filled the house once again. We need to go see her, Margaret snapped quickly. She's family. She owes us. Walter agreed instantly. Without hesitation, they sold what little valuables they had left and bought train tickets to Dallas. A few days later, the three of them stood outside the massive gates of the Whitmore estate, looking dusty, tired, and desperate. Walter pounded loudly against the golden gate. "Open up," he shouted. "I'm Savannah Whitmore's father. Tell her family is here." A security guard appeared behind the gate window and disappeared again after hearing their names. Several long minutes passed. Finally, the guard returned. "The lady of the house says she doesn't know anyone by those names," he announced coldly. "She says she has no family here. You're to leave immediately." Walter's face turned pale. "What? That's impossible. I raised her." The gates remained firmly shut. Margaret immediately turned on Walter in anger. "This is your fault. You're the one who sold her away." Charlotte shouted back furiously, blaming her mother for treating Savannah cruelly. Soon all three of them were screaming at each other beside the road, while passing carriages and automobiles slowed to watch the scene. The guards finally forced them away from the property entirely. With no money left and nowhere to stay, Walter, Margaret, and Charlotte ended up sleeping on the dirty streets of Dallas, begging strangers for spare coins just to survive. The same greed that destroyed their family had finally destroyed them too. Meanwhile, inside the Whitmore estate, Savannah sat peacefully beside the swimming pool, wearing a beautiful lace gown. One hand rested gently on her growing baby bump, while Benjamin sat beside her, smiling warmly. The frightened ranch girl from Red Creek was gone forever. Savannah Whitmore was no longer a servant, no longer unwanted, no longer a girl sold away for a repair shop. She had become a queen who found true love in the middle of hardship and betrayal. And here are the three lessons hidden inside Savannah's story. First, never judge a person by their clothes, job, or appearance. A man wearing dusty boots today may become a king tomorrow. True value lives inside the heart, not inside a bank account. Second, when people trade love and family for money, they destroy their own future. Wealth comes and goes, but loyalty and kindness last forever. And third, if you truly love someone, you must be willing to stand beside them during hard times, not only during success. Real love stays through storms, hunger, and struggle, not just comfort and luxury. I love all of you, my wonderful audience of Wild West Tales. Tell me how this story made you feel. Leave a comment below. Type 1 if you love this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from the wild.